Do you want to speak English better? Then you need to check out this video. Hi, I'm John Park. In this video, I conduct an interview with Robin Sanbothe, a colleague of mine, who has an extensive experience working with international students and people whose first language is not English. She offers some good suggestions for how to improve your ability to speak English. Without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. It's so good to see you, Robin.
Good to see you too, John.
All right, thank you so much for making the time to have an interview with me. And welcome to my
I'm glad to do it.
YouTube channel, Daring to Speak. Let's just jump in. And would you please tell me and my subscribers about what you do at Central?
Okay, I'm the Director of Seminary Relations, which means I serve on the community engagement team. I help with communications and marketing, and I also serve as the liaison to our alums. So that's pretty much it. So
yeah, that's a lot of work, and that must involve a lot of constituents, right? A lot of people.
It does.
So you work with a lot of people, and you reach out to a lot of communities. And Robin is my colleague at Central Baptist Theological Seminary, where I work. So in your role, you work with a diversity of constituents, a lot of people, including international students, staff, and faculty members whose first language, whose mother tongue is not English. So what have been some things that you think stood out culturally as you interacted with them?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that each person's facility with English is unique to that person.
Sure, right.
So you can't make any broad assumptions, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
I also noticed that we smile a lot and nod to one another.
Uh-huh.
And it helps if I make an effort to say "안녕하세요,"
right.
or if they say "hello, how are you" to me. And it's easier with colleagues than it is with students to try to have actual conversations. Which, we have more to talk about for one thing. But I know I make assumptions that if students are in the Korean language program, that they're not likely to have a lot of ability to speak or understand English. So maybe wrong, but I think a lot of times that is true. We have a ceremony to bless our women students during our commencement weekend activities. And because our women face more challenges in ministry, as I'm sure you're aware. I wanted to be able to bless our Korean women students in Korean. And so I asked my Korean colleagues to help me with translating a blessing into Korean and then how to pronounce it correctly. And I found them to be so very helpful. And we laughed a lot, mostly because of my pronunciation skills, which were not very good. And still, I think it made a huge difference. When we reach out to one another for help, it builds bridges that go beyond the language barriers.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And it also, a lot of effort on your part to, try to learn the Korean language, especially those, words that you want to say. And I think that speaks volumes about how much you care about the diversity and about different cultures. So I really appreciate you.
And it goes both ways.
That. Yes, it goes both ways. I totally agree with you. So related to the previous question, what do you think have been the challenges, international students and faculty members in terms of their use of English? What do you think they struggle with most?
I think when someone doesn't really understand what you're saying, but wants to be helpful, they might give the impression they do understand, which leads to a lack of communication. I've run into that. And then one thing I know about learning to communicate in a foreign language is that it's usually easier to understand it than to speak it. So, of course, that can be really frustrating when you can't make yourself understood. So those are a couple things I've noticed.
So what do you do, like when you've run into a situation where you thought that he or she understood what you said, but then turns out that he or she didn't understand it?
Well, it usually ends up being something I've asked about or asked some help with or need for some other project. And what I find is either I don't get it or what I get is not what I asked for, or there's still some confusion about what it's all about. So, and, I think what that leads to is I feel frustrated because I didn't get what I needed.
Right.
But I would have tried to explain it differently or use different language or found someone else who could help me say what it was I needed if I had had an opportunity to know that they didn't really understand what I was asking for. I've been given the impression that that's what that they did know, and then they didn't. So
right.
That can be pretty frustrating.
Right. Personally, what I found helpful was always follow up with an email or something in writing, so that they could actually see it, right? Instead of just hearing it.
That's a great idea.
Yes, I found that quite helpful.
So and I probably have done that on occasion, come to think of it, and it has helped.
Right.
So
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What were some English problems you have noticed? Some of the English challenges that you've noticed with international students, or just with anybody that you interact with whose primary language is not English?
Well, maybe sometimes a word is used in the wrong context, or a word that sounds like the right word might be used but doesn't make sense. And I think most of the time, someone who's a native English speaker can figure out what they mean, what's meant. And I know if I'm not sure, I'll usually ask a question to clarify. And the level of facility with English makes that conversation either easier or harder, of course.
Right.
So that's one of the things I've noticed. But
for me, English is not my first language. English is not my mother tongue. So I think I've given you the permission to correct me whenever I make a mistake. Has there been any other who actually approached you and given you that kind of permission to correct?
I don't remember anyone else in the Korean program at Central, but I have a good friend who is Greek, and she asked me frequently to help her with language issues, and hers was more about how to pronounce things. She always wanted me to help her with the correct pronunciation. She didn't want to sound like she was from Greece. She wanted to sound like she was closer to a native English speaker in the US. So, she asked me very specifically about how to do that. So I did it whenever she asked.
I see. So with permission, you could go ahead and maybe offer some corrections, right?
Yes.
But without permission, it's very difficult for you
to... You don't want to offend somebody.
Right.
Or make them feel bad. I never want to make anybody feel bad. So,
right.
But I also tend to want to be helpful.
Sure.
Maybe that's not always, helpful, but it could be taken the wrong way, I think.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes into something else you asked me about, suggestions in terms of culture and English. You've asked me that before. And
sure.
So what I would say is don't get discouraged by ignorant Americans who make you feel uncomfortable. We're not all like that. And help us to understand when we don't get something that is different for your culture than it is for ours. I know, for instance, I would want to know if something I say or do is hurtful. And I would want to correct that behavior in myself. So I would encourage you to communicate those kinds of things.
Right. And I once again, I appreciate your effort to reach out and try to learn like new things and new cultures. And, personally, from my experience, I always appreciated people who came to me and offered, corrections, because I think it also has a lot to do with my attitude, because I'm someone who is teachable, and I always appreciate someone who offers those kinds of corrections. It's not because they, think that I am ignorant or that I am stupid or anything, but rather they care about me and they want me to succeed and thrive in this English-speaking environment. That's why I always appreciated, their feedback and their comments. So
I've appreciated that about you. I think that's helpful. It would be helpful. It's something I would like to think about for myself. If I'm in a culture and I'm trying to learn a different language, that's something I should think about. So.
Okay, great. Awesome. Do you happen to have any suggestions for those students, international students, or those whose primary language is not English, especially in terms of culture and the English language?
Of course, practice is always the best thing,
Practice
right?
makes perfect, right?
But I saw a TV series recently where one person who was trying to help another person become more fluent in English introduced them to karaoke.
Oh,
Singing along with the artist in English with the words right there in front of them. And
right.
that wouldn't be unlike the idea in your book of speaking along with recordings of someone
Yes.
who is preaching or giving a speech in
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
English. So I
Right.
think that would be one way to learn the fluency. I think helped with the fluency for this particular person in the
Right,
TV show.
right.
I don't know how accurate that is, but it made sense to me.
Yeah, I think it does. Recently, my wife introduced to me to an app called Karaoke, and so you can actually type in the song that you want to sing, and then it plays the background music, and you can actually sing along. So I tried different songs, and one of them was "You Mean Everything to Me." You know that song?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. So I do think that anything related to English helps. The more the better. Singing along a song, an English song, I think definitely helps. So, well, thank you for your suggestions.
Sure.
Do you happen to have any other suggestions other than singing along and maybe repeating after native speakers?
I think you find a partner. That always helps too. Someone who, especially if your partner would like to learn Korean,
right,
and you're trying to learn English, if you could help each other, that's always a good thing. But even if you just want somebody to practice speaking English with, that's a good idea, I think.
Yeah. So finding a speaking partner and also and language exchange could be really a good way to practice speaking more.
Right.
Okay. All right. What do you think is the best way? I kind of you already alluded to it. Is the best way to improve one's ability to speak English? You mentioned the practice, and I know practice always I think is the best answer. But do you happen to have any other answers or responses related to that?
Well, I think the karaoke thing helps some.
Yeah.
And watching television,
Sure.
or watching a show where you're hearing dialogue and the flow, the ebb and flow of the language. I think that's a cultural thing too, how fast or how slow certain kinds of conversations happen. I don't know. Finding a good teacher is always good.
Right.
Or
I think so.
Even a good electronic resource can be a helpful thing. So,
right. Yeah. There are so many ways I think you could learn new languages these days, especially because of so many resources, and especially with YouTube these days. I think there are so many things you could do. Yeah. Great. What do you think are some things non-native speakers of English should do more or less, or start doing or stop doing in order to continue to improve their English?
Maybe not worry about how they sound or whether they have the words exactly right. I know I appreciate the effort to try communicate and would not mind at all if someone was wanting to practice or wanted feedback. So, that's probably one of the things I would say would be the most helpful. I'm inhibited about stuff like that. I tend to get nervous, or I'm afraid of what people might think, when I say something wrong or say it the wrong way. And you can make some pretty funny mistakes sometimes, by using a word that makes it a completely different meaning than you intended. But if you could just get past that and put yourself out there and just try, just jump in and try speaking, whether you feel confident or not. Pretend you are, and then the confidence will follow after.
Yeah. In other words, you have to develop a thick skin, right? You have to have a thick skin. Don't mind so much about making mistakes, because the more mistakes you make, I think the better English I think you can speak. And I know sometimes I find myself kind of too conscientious of what I say and how I say. Then I start like making mistakes and even sometimes stammer. So I try to make myself comfortable. And I just try to spit things out and then go from there. And usually the conversation flows better, that way.
Yeah, and I think you have hit on a lot of good things, because the way that you speak English has a good flow to it. It feels natural. It doesn't feel to me like you're searching for words all the time by any means. You're probably thinking in English. I know that makes a difference if you can get out of the having to translate everything in your head to be able to say it out here. Then it does become much easier.
Yeah, I know that there was a time when I had to translate, Korean to English and then from English to Korean. But then I think once I got past that, I think I, think in English and try to, do things in English as much as possible.
Well, I've never gotten that fluent in another language, so that it always impresses me when people get to that point.
I really appreciate your affirmation of my English skills, and I hope that others, like other subscribers who watch this video, would be able to be motivated and encouraged to, continue to practice their speaking abilities. Because my channel is all about encouraging and motivating people to really continue to practice and dare to speak. So as we wrap up this interview, do you happen to have any final words?
Okay, I'd say read John's book or visit his YouTube channel. I think you have all kinds of helpful ideas for how to become more fluent in English. So I think this is one of the resources people can use.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. And I hope that our subscribers would do take the time to check out some of my videos. I'm sure that they'll find them helpful. So once again, Robin, thank you so much for taking the time to have an interview with me, and God's blessings with the work that you do at Central.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
awesome.
you, and blessings to you too.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. Also, subscribe to my channel and hit the like and notification buttons. Stay safe and keep daring to speak.